In Far From Home, Mysterio keeps his signature costume but with a more techie vibe. He's like a magical Iron Man, and how is that not the coolest? When you can do whatever a spider can, what can stop you? Not much, as the Amazing Spider-Man will show you. Unfortunately, Peter Parker happens to live in a world where science experiments go wrong all of the time. Lots of these accidents create dastardly villains that want to squash our hero. Some have even succeeded. Here are the Binger's greatest Spidey foes, ranked. Starting us off is Spider-Man Homecoming's Vulture. Adrian Toomes actually has a rich comics history, going all the way back to Amazing Spider-Man issue number 2. That makes him the second supervillain Spidey has ever faced. In the comics, Vulture is mainly a career criminal who uses his scientific knowledge to develop a winged costume. Homecoming made some changes to the character to make him make more sense in the MCU. Instead of being a genius who steals just because he can, movie Vulture is a working class man who happens upon alien technology. He then has the Tinkerer develop the flying suit and other tools that he uses for his heists. This makes him more relatable than his arrogant comics counterpart. He's just a guy trying to support his family in an unfair world. He's still wrong, but his motives make more sense than in the comics. He also goes through a thematic upgrade. He robs tech left over from the Avengers battles. He then sells it or repurposes it for his own use. Essentially, he is a literal vulture of super tech. This made him a great villain for the untested Tom Holland Spider-Man. He was a driven, dangerous man, but nowhere near the level of a Thanos or even a Red Skull. Spidey learned from defeating him, and he was able to take those lessons to be a better hero. Many of the great Spider-Man villains are tragic. Now that could be said of any hero really, but Spidey writers really seem to zero in on villains who don't want to be villains. Take the Lizard for example. Dr. Curt Connors is a scientist searching for a way to help humanity. He looks into lizards in particular, fascinated by their ability to regrow lost limbs. Now Dr. Connors has himself a missing arm, so you can see why he'd be interested in this kind of ability. At some point in the story, be it comics, movies, or really anything else, Peter Parker comes into contact with Dr. Connors. He comes to respect him and even look up to him as a scientific authority. Sadly, Connors uses himself as a test subject and mutates into a giant lizard man as a result. The lizard often proves to be a fearsome physical foe, with more than enough strength and speed to give Spidey some trouble. It also doesn't help that Spidey wants to cure Connors rather than defeat him. It makes the fight harder as Peter doesn't give it his all, but Connors is lost to his animal instincts. Poor Peter ends up having to defeat Curt. Sometimes he cures him, but he can't stop the police from arresting Connors for the destruction that he caused as the Lizard. The Lizard serves as an interesting reflection of the nature of humanity, as well as a sad reminder that superheroes can't save everyone. With decades of comics under his belt, the story of Spider-Man sometimes gets a little weird.
What just happened?
The movies tend to begin and end with the idea that Peter Parker got bit by a spider and now has powers thanks to science. But there's actually a mystical side to Spider-Man in the comics, one that comes with a dangerous set of baddies. The Inheritors are essentially energy vampires from another dimension. They especially seem to enjoy the energy produced by those connected to a spider totem. You see, in the comics universe, characters with animal-themed abilities, like Black Panther or Spider-Man, are connected to mystical animal symbols called totems. The Inheritors hunted down those spider totems, forcing all of the spider people of various universes to come together to fight them. Miles Morales was there, as was Spider-Gwen. There was a cowboy Spider-Man, a ninja Spider-Man, and of course Spider-Pig was there. The reason it took an army of spiders was because the Inheritors were just that strong. One alone almost ended Peter Parker's life. A whole family who had the ability to teleport around the multiverse almost ended Spider-Kind as we know it. The Inheritors deserve recognition for being one of the few cosmic foes that Spidey has, and causing an epic Spider-People team-up long before Into the Spider-Verse was a thing. One villain fans really want to see in the movies is Kraven the Hunter. After all, Kraven is one of the more realistic of Spidey's foes. As his name suggests, Kraven hunts animals. He's really good at it. So good, in fact, that he gets bored. When he learns of a man who can move like a spider and always evades police, Kraven gets excited at that. This could be his greatest hunt. Kraven's talent for setting traps, persistence, and strength-enhancing voodoo potions prove a great match for Spidey time and time again. And it's just really terrifying to have a person literally stalking you like you're a trophy. Kraven himself is just a normal guy with exceptional skills and herbal cocktails that empower him, but that makes him the perfect villain for the more realistic Marvel movie world. It would also save a bunch in CGI costs since there wouldn't be any powers to render. Are you hearing this, Marvel Studios? Save yourself some of that massive endgame budget and put Kraven in a movie, please. Thank you. One of the more exciting things about Spider-Man Far From Home is the introduction of Mysterio into the movies. It's about time, seeing as Mysterio himself was born from Hollywood. Quentin Beck, the original Mysterio, is a special effects artist and stuntman. We should point out that his original comics appearance was in a time before CGI, so Mysterio was more of a smoke and mirrors type of effects artist. That's important because once Spider-Man got famous, it drove Beck to villainy. Beck believed that he deserved more credit for his work, but Hollywood rarely ever appreciates those behind the scenes guys. Yo, shout out to the amazing crew at The Binger. We got you. After seeing Spider-Man upstage him, Beck decided to destroy the Wallcrawler in what he thought would be his greatest performance. Mysterio's emphasis on trickery and illusion make him a refreshing villain in a world where a lot of baddies just punch really hard and shoot energy blasts. He also has a sweet costume which somehow perfectly balances cheesiness with coolness. In Far From Home, Mysterio keeps his signature costume but with a more techie vibe. He's like a magical Iron Man, and how is that not the coolest? The most infamous villains in Spider-Man history have got to be the clones. Yeah, Spider-Man has clones. A villain named the Jackal managed to get hold of Peter Parker's DNA and created several clones, complete with spider powers. Since they can do anything Spidey can, they prove to be a perfectly equal match. For Peter, they also prove to be a crisis-inducing set of brothers. For Marvel fans, the clones are even more confusing. The original Clone Saga is one of the most notorious stories in comics history. Clones are already a risky prospect for a more grounded hero like Spider-Man, but the comic storyline spanned so many issues and had so many plot twists that it became extremely convoluted. However, a lot of fans like the clones themselves. Scarlet Spider is a very popular Spider-Man ally, and he's returned several times at fan request, so the clones managed to somehow be both irritating and extremely popular. They make their mark on Spidey in a truly unique way. Just because Spider-Man is a funny, family-friendly hero, it doesn't mean he lacks twisted villains, and none are more twisted than Carnage. Imagine Venom, but as a psychopath. And you've barely scratched the surface of Carnage. Part of that is because Carnage is actually an offshoot of Venom. A piece of Venom's symbiote costume splits off and attaches to Cletus Cassidy, a man who has committed many heinous crimes that our censors actually won't even let us name. So Carnage is a serial criminal with the strength and speed of Venom, as well as the ability to disguise himself. He also really enjoys using the symbiote's morphing ability to make all kinds of nasty little weapons. What makes him really dangerous, though, is that he just likes causing chaos. That's it. Unlike other Spidey villains who want money, fame, power, Carnage doesn't have a goal in mind at all. Spidey can't predict his moves, and every second that Carnage is free is another life at risk. Defeating Carnage tests Peter's endurance because he ends up confronting some sickening things. It also tests his skill, making it so he ends up having to team up with Venom on several occasions to stop Carnage. Maybe that'll be how the two team up in the movies. A Spidey villain turned hero, Venom is popular enough to be his own thing at this point. Sony proved that Venom is such a strong character that he, and Tom Hardy, can carry a lackluster script to a great box office. That has a lot to do with the fact that Venom doing what Venom does That's just plain cool. He's power without the responsibility. Well, sometimes he feels a responsibility to help the weak, but he takes it a little bit too far. Venom eats people, and that makes him a terrifying foe to face. Spider-Man can attest to that. Venom is also one of the few beings in the world who doesn't trigger the spider sense. That means he can sneak up on Spider-Man, which is quite an impressive feat. Venom's first movie appearance didn't quite get to explore the best parts of the character, but the newer movie really dug into this weird mix of brutality and fun that is Venom. He's so ridiculous that he can somehow be scary at the same time. He's probably the most 90s thing ever, and yet he still endures. It was a tough choice between these next two. I mean, each of them have been iconic Spidey foes in their own way. Dr. Octopus needs no introduction, so let's do the short version. Otto Octavius is a brilliant scientist who lacks recognition and funding. An experiment goes wrong, fusing his metal arms to his spine. This turns him into Dr. Octopus, a man who will stop at nothing to achieve the recognition and power he thinks he deserves. In the comics, Doc Ock created the Sinister Six and almost took over the world once. He even turned the Avengers against Spider-Man. Later, he managed to mind swap with Peter Parker. This lets Ock live inside Peter's body and take over his life. He becomes the superior Spider-Man, taking a more severe approach to crime fighting and establishing a company in Peter's name. In video games, Dr. Octopus often features as a major boss fight. His most memorable appearance is in 2018's Spider-Man on PlayStation 4. The game started with Otto as Peter's mentor, a father figure to a budding scientist. But once Otto fuses with the arms, his brain is forever changed, making him the final boss and a tragic loss for Peter. In the movies, Dr. Octopus was given a great turn by Alfred Molina. Molina also played him as a sympathetic man and mentor to Peter, who was corrupted by the arms. His costume for the movie, a trench coat and shades, also became Dr. Octopus's standard look for a while. And who can forget Olivia Liv Octavius from Into the Spider-Verse, who gave us a fun new take on the villain? You probably guessed it, because number one has to be the Green Goblin. The Goblin has appeared in many forms in pretty much every Spider-Man thing. The two most important goblins have to be Norman Osborn and his son, Harry. Norman Osborn is a businessman who is obsessed with power. Sometimes this manifests as him wanting more profit for his company. Other times he has political aspirations. But without fail, Osborn will end up injecting himself with an experimental serum. This serum gives him enhanced physical abilities, but also robs him of his sanity. The mix of his ruthless intelligence, crazed determination, and top-of-the-line tech make him a very dangerous foe. He ups the stakes, however, by learning Spider-Man's secret identity. That personal, ever-present threat makes him Spider-Man's real arch-nemesis. In the comics, Osborn took the life of Gwen Stacy, Peter's first love. He also took over S.H.I.E.L.D. at one point, forming his own team of Dark Avengers with villains disguised as heroes. In the Ultimate Universe, he actually does end Peter Parker, inspiring Miles Morales to become the new Spider-Man. In video games, Osborn features as a boss several times. The Spider-Man game based on the first Raimi movie actually lets you play as the Goblin, taking control of the glider and all. It's awesome. In 2018 Spider-Man, Osborn is New York City's mayor and bullies Otto Octavius into becoming Dr. Octopus. The Goblin's even teased near the end of the game. In the movies, Green Goblin is famously played by Willem Dafoe. He plays both the businessman and crazed villain parts of the character amazingly, and comes back to taunt his son Harry as a hallucination. Harry later becomes the hoverboard-riding new Goblin, something that the fans don't really talk about. In The Amazing Spider-Man 2, Harry becomes the Goblin and recreates Gwen Stacy's tragic end. Green Goblin acts as a hybrid villain to Spider-Man. Norman Osborn's intelligence and resources make him a sort of Lex Luthor in that he can't ever really be outplayed. But the Goblin's insanity makes him like the Joker, obsessed with Peter, a threat on a very personal level. These two combined make him the worst foe Spider-Man will ever face. So, what do you think? Did your favorite villain make the list? Do you agree with our placements? Let us know in the comments section down below, and be sure to subscribe to The Binger to see more videos like this one.